They told me ADX Florence held the worst criminals in America. Terrorists, cartel leaders, serial killers. What they didn't tell me was that some of the things locked in solitary confinement down in H Unit weren't arrested. They were collected. And the scratching I heard coming from cell 47 didn't come from anything with human hands. My first day at ADX Florence Supermax started like any other job. Paperwork, orientation videos, and a laminated badge with my face looking too optimistic for what was coming. The facility squatted in the Colorado mountains like a concrete tumor, all sharp angles and windowless walls designed to swallow hope whole. Jake Morrison, a gravelly voice, pulled me from staring at the razor wire coiling endlessly along the perimeter. I turned to find a man in his 50s, barrel-chested with silver threading through his dark hair. His uniform was immaculate, but his eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. "That's me, Marcus Webb. I'll be showing you the ropes." He didn't offer his hand. "Follow me. Keep your mouth shut, your eyes forward, and whatever you do, don't ask questions about H Unit until you've been here at least a month." The way he said it wasn't a suggestion. Inside, the prison swallowed us whole. The temperature dropped 10 degrees past the final security checkpoint. Everything was concrete and steel. Walls, floors, ceilings. Our footsteps echoed down corridors that seemed to stretch into forever. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to remind you nothing here worked quite right. "Standard cells are 7 by 12, Marcus explained as we walked. "Inmates get 1 hour of recreation and a slightly larger concrete box. Mail is screened. Visitors are rare. Most guys here will never see the outside again." I'd read all this in the orientation materials, but walking through isolation and seeing its physical manifestation were entirely different experiences. The silence pressed against my eardrums. No shouting, no clanging, just an oppressive quiet, broken only by our footsteps and that infernal buzzing of dying lights. "You'll start on C Unit. Standard protocols. Meal delivery, cell checks, incident reports. Boring stuff to get you acclimated." "What about H Unit?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Marcus stopped walking. The corridor suddenly felt colder. He turned slowly, his face unreadable. "What did I say about questions?" "Sorry, H Unit is where they keep the special cases. High-value targets. Inmates requiring additional security measures." His words sounded rehearsed, like he'd given this exact explanation 100 times. "You won't be assigned there until you've proven yourself. Might be never. Some guards request transfers before they ever see the inside of H Unit, and administration is usually happy to oblige." "Why would—" "Because some doors stay closed for reasons beyond security." Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You'll understand eventually, or you won't, and you'll be happier for it." He resumed walking, faster now, as if trying to outpace the conversation. We passed through 3 more security checkpoints, each requiring biometric scans and key cards. The air grew staler with each sealed door that clanged shut behind us. C Unit looked exactly as I had imagined. Rows of identical steel doors, each with a narrow slot for meal trays and a reinforced window no bigger than a paperback book. Inside each cell, I knew, was a concrete bed, a stainless steel toilet-sink combination, and a human being locked away from the world. "Rounds every 30 minutes. You look through the window, verify the inmate is alive and accounted for, log it on your tablet. Medical emergency, you call it in. You never open a cell alone. Understood?" "Understood." "Meal service is at 0600, 1200, and 1800. Trays go in
in through the slot. Wait for the tray to come back before moving to the next cell. Some of these guys will try to talk to you. They'll tell you stories, beg for favors, claim they're innocent. You will not engage. Acknowledgement is weakness here. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. Marcus's radio crackled to life. Webb, we need you in administration. New transfer coming in. He sighed, then fixed me with a hard stare. You good here for an hour? Just do rounds. Don't deviate from protocol. I'm good. Remember, eyes forward, mouth shut. He turned to leave, then paused. And Jake, if you hear anything strange, anything that doesn't sound quite right, that's just the ventilation system playing tricks. The acoustics in this place make sounds bounce around weird. Your mind will try to make patterns out of nothing. Don't let it. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the corridor, leaving me alone with 200 of America's most dangerous criminals and a warning that felt like it was about something else entirely.
The first 2 weeks passed in a blur of routine. Wake up, drive through mountain fog to the prison, spend 8 hours walking the same corridors, go home to my empty apartment, and try not to dream about concrete boxes. Marcus had been right about one thing. The monotony was almost comforting. Almost. But there were moments when the comfort cracked, like the way veteran guards would skip certain cells during rounds, their eyes sliding past specific windows as if they'd trained themselves not to see. Or how meal trays for particular inmates required 2 guards and a supervisor's authorization, even though the protocol manual listed no such requirement. Nobody explained these unwritten rules. You just watched and learned to mirror the behavior of people who'd been there longer. Why does cell 47 get fed last? I asked Marcus one morning as we prepped meal carts. His jaw tightened, because that's how it's done. But the manual says sequential order. The manual doesn't know everything. He lowered his voice, glancing around even though we were alone in the prep room. Some protocols exist outside official documentation. You follow them because the people before you followed them, and those people are still sane enough to go home to their families. That should have been my last question about cell 47. It wasn't. The cell was in H unit, which I still hadn't been cleared to enter, but I'd overheard conversations in the break room, caught fragments of sentences that ended abruptly when I walked in. H unit was different. H unit had rules that made the veterans nervous. Never make eye contact with the window in 47, I'd heard someone whisper. The feeding slot stays open exactly 15 seconds, no more, no less. If it talks to you, you don't respond. You don't even acknowledge you heard it. It. Not him, not the inmate. It. My curiosity became an itch I couldn't scratch. During my rounds on C unit, I'd pause at the corridor junction where I could see the reinforced door leading to H unit. The door was different from others, thicker, with additional magnetic locks and a biometric scanner that required 3 separate authorizations. A small camera watched the entrance constantly. On my 17th day, I heard it for the first time. I was doing midnight rounds. The prison settled into its deepest quiet. My footsteps echoed off concrete as I moved from cell to cell, tablet in hand, logging each verification. The fluorescent lights hummed their usual discordant song. Everything was routine until I reached the end of C Unit's east corridor. That's when the sound drifted through the ventilation shaft. It started as a low vibration, almost below hearing, the kind of frequency you feel in your chest before your ears register it. Then it rose, modulating into something that might have been humming, if humming could carry harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. The sound was layered, multiple tones woven together in a pattern that made my teeth ache. I froze, staring at the ventilation grate above my head. The humming stopped. Silence rushed back in, pressing against my eardrums. Then I heard heard the scratching. It came from the same shaft, rhythmic and deliberate, not the scrabbling of rats or the scrape of loose metal. This was purposeful, almost musical in its pattern. 3 short scratches, 2 long ones, a pause, then repeated. The sound moved through the ductwork, traveling from somewhere deeper in the facility, from H Unit's direction. My hand moved to my radio before I remembered Marcus's warning about the ventilation system playing tricks, acoustics making sounds bounce around weird, my mind trying to make patterns out of nothing. But this wasn't nothing. This was something, creating a pattern. The scratching stopped as abruptly as it started. I stood there for a full minute, barely breathing, waiting for it to resume. The silence felt heavier now, pregnant with the absence of sound. I completed my rounds with shaking hands, logging each cell as verified, while my mind replayed that impossible humming. Back in the guard station, I pulled up the duty logs, scanning through entries from other midnight shifts. Most were routine, but scattered through the months, I found brief notes. Unusual sounds reported, H Unit vicinity, maintenance notified, ventilation system inspection requested, no issues found. Guard Ramirez requested transfer, personal reasons. Acoustic anomaly logged, environmental factors. The entries were always vague, always explained away, but there were too many of them for coincidence. I looked up to find Marcus watching me from the doorway. I had no idea how long he'd been standing there. "You heard something tonight," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly. He walked over, pulled up a chair, and sat down with the heaviness of a man carrying a burden he couldn't put down. "The ventilation system," I started, "is working fine. Always has been." Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. "Jake, there are things about this facility that don't make it into orientation videos. Things that exist in the space between what's officially acknowledged and what everyone who works here long enough comes to understand." "What kind of things?" He was quiet for a long moment, weighing something in his mind. "The kind that make you question whether you want to keep collecting a paycheck." He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Get some rest. And Jake, stop looking at the H Unit door like you're trying to see through it. Some doors are locked for reasons that have nothing to do with keeping inmates in." He left me alone with the monitors, the silent cells, and a growing certainty that ADX Florence was hiding something that had nothing to do with criminal justice.
My clearance for H Unit came through on a Tuesday morning, 5 weeks into my employment. I hadn't requested it. Nobody asked if I wanted it. The authorization just appeared in my personnel file with a note. "Report to H Unit Supervisor Chen for orientation. 1400 hours. Marcus found me staring at my tablet in the break room. "So, they're moving you up." His voice was flat, unreadable. "I didn't ask for this. Nobody does. They assign you when they think you're ready, or when they're desperate for coverage." He poured himself coffee from the ancient machine in the corner, the liquid coming out somewhere between brown and black. "Chen will give you the official briefing. I'll give you the real one. H Unit has 7 occupied cells. You'll be told they contain high-value targets requiring enhanced isolation protocols." That's partially true. What's the other part? Marcus's hand tightened around his mug. "The other part is that some of those cells don't contain inmates convicted of crimes. They contain things the government doesn't know what else to do with. Things that couldn't be killed, disappeared, or explained away, so they got buried here under layers of clearance and plausible deniability." The fluorescent light above us flickered, casting Marcus's face in shadow. "You're telling me the prison holds something that isn't human?" "I'm telling you that Cell 47 has been occupied for 11 years by something that knows details about every guard assigned to it. Personal details, names of family members, addresses, childhood memories, things nobody could know through normal intelligence gathering." He set down his mug. "I'm telling you that 6 guards have requested immediate transfer after being assigned to H Unit. 2 more suffered psychological breaks and took medical retirement. And I'm telling you that despite this, nobody in administration will acknowledge anything unusual is happening. Why not just quit? Because we signed NDAs that would bury us in federal prison if we talked.
because what we've seen sounds insane when you try to explain it to someone on the outside, and because some part of us understands that whatever's down there needs to stay contained. He checked his watch. You've got an hour before your briefing. Use it to decide if you really want to do this. Once you walk into H Unit, you can't unknow what you'll learn. Supervisor Chen was a compact woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything in a single glance. Her office was sparse, a desk, 2 chairs, and walls covered in protocol sheets and security diagrams. Guard Mortison, sit. I sat. H Unit contained 7 inmates requiring special handling due to security risk, psychological instability, or political sensitivity. Your job is identical to C Unit with the following additions. She slid a document across the desk. Enhanced protocols. Memorize them. You'll sign acknowledging you understand that deviation results in immediate termination and possible federal charges. I scanned the document. Most of it was standard. Additional biometric checks, mandatory 2-guard minimum for cell approach, feeding procedures through automated systems. But buried in the middle was a section that made my blood cold. Verbal engagement protocol. Under no circumstances will guards respond to questions, statements, or requests from inmates in cells 44 through 50. Any communication attempts will be logged but not acknowledged. Guards experiencing psychological distress after exposure to these inmates will report immediately to medical. Why would inmates cause psychological distress? I asked. Her expression didn't change. Some individuals possess exceptional manipulation skills. They're dangerous not because of physical capability, but because of psychological warfare tactics. Your silence is your protection. Understood? Understood. She stood, indicating the briefing was over. Webb will accompany you on your first H Unit round. Follow his lead exactly. Welcome to enhanced security, Morrison. The walk to H Unit felt like descending into a different facility entirely. The corridor sloped downward, the air growing colder with each step. Additional security checkpoints required retinal scans and palm prints. The walls here were thicker, the steel doors heavier. Everything felt designed to contain something, desperate to escape. Marcus was waiting at the final checkpoint. His face was pale. Once we're inside, don't stop walking. Don't look directly into any window for more than 3 seconds. And no matter what you hear from cell 47, you keep moving. Clear? Clear. The magnetic locks disengaged with a sound like a rifle bolt. The door swung open. H Unit was smaller than I'd expected. A single corridor with 7 cells, 3 on each side and 1 at the far end. The lighting was different here. Whiter and harsher. The silence was absolute, as if the air itself had been soundproof. We started our round. The first 3 cells contained men who looked exactly like what I'd expected. Hardened criminals with dead eyes and stillness that came from years of isolation. They didn't react to our presence. Cell 44 was different. The man inside stood facing the door as if he'd been waiting. He was ordinary looking, middle-aged, average height, thinning hair, but his eyes were wrong. Too focused, too aware. "Hello, Jake," he said softly. I kept walking, following Marcus's lead, but my heart hammered against my ribs. I'd never introduced myself. My name wasn't on my uniform. "Your mother called you Jakey when you were small. You hated it. Made you feel infantile when you wanted to be taken seriously. She still calls you that in her head when she worries about you, which is often. She worries you're lonely." She's right.
We reached cell 45, empty. Cell 46 contained a woman who sat motionless on her concrete bed, staring at the wall. Then we arrived at cell 47. The window was covered from the inside with something that looked like paper, blocking any view. A smell emanated from the feeding slot, not unpleasant, but strange, like ozone and copper, and something organic I couldn't identify. Marcus paused, his tablet raised to log the cell check. His hand trembled slightly. That's when I heard it speak. The voice that came through the door wasn't quite right. It had the rhythm and cadence of human speech, but the tone was wrong. Too resonant, with harmonics that shouldn't exist in a single voice. It sounded like 3 people speaking in perfect unison. "Marcus Webb, 32 years of service. Divorced. 2 daughters who don't call anymore. You dream about water. Always drowning in dark water where things with too many teeth wait below. Marcus's face had gone gray. The voice shifted, those impossible harmonics resolving into something that made my skin crawl. And Jake Morrison, 28 years old, no family except a mother who worries. You came here looking for purpose. You'll find something else instead. You'll find us, and we'll find out what you taste like when you sleep. The scratching started then, the same pattern I'd heard through the ventilation. 3 short, 2 long, rhythmic and purposeful. But this time, I could tell it wasn't coming from hands. It was coming from something with claws, dragging across concrete in the darkness behind that covered window. Marcus grabbed my arm and pulled me past the remaining cell, past the guard station, back toward the exit. We didn't speak until the magnetic locks sealed H unit behind us. What was that? My voice came out hoarse. Marcus leaned against the wall, his chest heaving like he'd run a marathon. That, he said finally, is why some of us drink ourselves to sleep, and why you need to decide right now if you're staying or requesting a transfer. I should have asked for the transfer. Every instinct screamed at me to walk away from H unit and never look back, but I didn't, because that thing in cell 47 knew my childhood nickname, and I needed to understand how.
3 weeks after my first H-Unit round, I volunteered for night shift. Marcus tried to talk me out of it. Night shift in H-Unit is different, he said over burnt coffee in the break room. The things down there are more active when it's dark. I don't know why. Maybe they know fewer people are watching. Maybe darkness makes them stronger. But every incident we've had occurred between midnight and 4 in the morning. What kind of incidents? He stared into his coffee like it held answers. The kind that don't make it into official reports. I took the shift anyway. Partly because the pay differential helped with my mother's medical bills, mostly because I couldn't stop thinking about Cell 47 and how it had known things it shouldn't. My first 2 nights were quiet. I did rounds with a guard named Torres, a quiet man in his 50s who'd worked H-Unit for 6 years. He moved through the protocols with mechanical precision, never looking at the windows longer than necessary, never acknowledging when inmates spoke. The 3rd night, Torres called in sick. I was alone. "You'll be fine," Supervisor Chen said over the phone, her voice clipped. "Follow standard protocols. If anything unusual occurs, you lock down and call for backup. Do not deviate. Do not investigate. Understood?" Understood. But standing in the H-Unit control room at 1 in the morning, watching the monitors display 7 cells wrapped in darkness except for the dim emergency lighting, I felt anything but fine. The facility seemed different at night. The silence deeper, the shadows longer, the air heavier with something I couldn't name. My first round went smoothly. Cells 41 through 43 contained sleeping inmates. Cell 44's occupant stood at his window, watching me pass with those 2 aware eyes. Cell 45 remained empty. The woman in 46 sat motionless in the same position as always. Cell 47's window stayed covered, but I heard breathing from inside. Slow, deliberate, and layered like multiple sets of lungs working in rhythm. I logged everything and returned to the control room. 2 hours until the next round. At 2:15, the lights in H-Unit flickered. It lasted only a second, but in that moment of darkness, I heard all 7 cell doors rattle simultaneously, as if something had tested them at the exact same instant. My hand moved to the radio. The light stabilized, the rattling stopped, everything returned to silence. "Control, this is Morrison in H-Unit. Just experienced a power fluctuation. Requesting maintenance check." Static answered me. Then, "Control, this is Morrison. We show no power fluctuations on our end. All systems normal. Probably just the backup generator cycling. Monitor and report if it happens again. I stared at the monitors. The cells appeared unchanged, but something felt different, like the air pressure had shifted. At 2:45, I started my second round. The first 3 cells were unchanged. Cell 44's occupant wasn't at his window this time. I could see him lying on his bed, but his eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. As I passed, he spoke without looking at me. "It's awake now. It knows you're alone." I kept walking, my mouth dry. Cell 45, the empty one, was no longer empty. I stopped, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. A figure stood in the center of the cell, tall, thin, facing the back wall. It wore what looked like a prison uniform, but the fabric hung wrong, like it was draped over a frame that wasn't quite human-shaped. "Control, I have an unauthorized presence in Cell 45. Cell was confirmed empty 2 hours ago. Requesting immediate backup." Static. Then Chen's voice, sharp with concern. "Morrison, maintain position. Backup is en route. Do not approach the cell. Do not engage." The figure in Cell 45 began to turn. I should have backed away. Protocol demanded it, but I was frozen, watching as the thing completed its rotation. Where a face should have been, there was only smooth skin stretched over a skull with wrong proportions. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just blank flesh that somehow seemed to be watching me. "Morrison, report!" Chen's voice crackled through the radio. "There's something in Cell 45. It's not human. Stay calm. Backup is 90 seconds out. Do not—" The thing tilted its head, an eerily inquisitive gesture. Then it raised one hand and pressed it against the cell window. The hand had too many fingers, each one too long, ending in points that might have been nails or might have been something else. From Cell 47, I heard laughter, not the impossible harmonics from before, but genuine amusement that sounded like wind through a cave. "You see it now. You see what they've been hiding? We're not alone down here, Jake Morrison. We're never alone." The scratching started again, that same rhythmic pattern, but now it came from multiple cells simultaneously. Cell 44, Cell 46, Cell 47. 3 sources creating a symphony of claws on concrete. The thing in Cell 45 pressed its face against the window, that blank expanse of skin somehow conveying hunger. I backed away, my hand on my radio, my other hand reaching for the panic button that would seal H-Unit completely. That's when the lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed me. I could hear my own breathing, harsh and rapid. I could hear the scratching, growing louder. And underneath it all, I could hear footsteps, multiple sets of footsteps, coming from cells that should have been locked. My fingers found the panic button. I slammed it down. Emergency lights blazed to life, bathing H-Unit in red illumination. Alarms screamed. Magnetic locks engaged with sounds like gunshots. And Cell 45 was empty again. The backup team arrived 30 seconds later. 4 guards led by Marcus, all armed, all wearing expressions that said they'd seen this before. They swept H-Unit while I stood against the wall, shaking. "All cells secured," one guard reported. "All inmates accounted for." "Cell 45?" Marcus asked. "Empty. No signs of occupation." Marcus turned to me, his face grim in the red light. "What did you see?" I told him every detail. The figure with no face, the impossible hand, the footsteps in the darkness. He listened without interrupting, then nodded slowly. "Come with me." He led me to the control room and pulled up the security footage. We watched my rounds in fast forward. When we reached the timestamp for Cell 45, Marcus slowed the playback.
The footage showed me walking the corridor, showed me stopping at Cell 45, showed me staring at an empty cell for 45 seconds before backing away and hitting the panic button. Cell 45 remained empty throughout the entire recording. "The cameras don't see what we see," Marcus said quietly. "Whatever is down here exists in a space between what can be documented and what can be experienced. Administration knows, they've always known, but as long as the cameras show empty cells and sleeping inmates. They can maintain deniability. What are they? I asked. What's really in cell 47? What was in cell 45? Marcus shut off the monitor. Things the government collected over decades. Things that didn't fit into any category they understood. Things that couldn't be killed or contained anywhere else. So they buried them here in the most secure facility in America. And they paid people like us to stand watch and pretend we were guarding normal criminals. Why not just tell us the truth? I asked. Because the truth would sound insane. Because official acknowledgement would mean official responsibility. And because as long as we're just guards following protocols, they can deny everything if things go wrong. He gripped my shoulder. You did good tonight, Jake. You survived your first real encounter. Some guards don't. Guard Ramirez, he opened cell 47's door during a night shift. We found him 3 hours later, catatonic, unable to speak. He's in a psychiatric facility now, and administration listed it as a mental health episode. My legs felt weak. I want to request a transfer. You can't. Not for 6 months. That's in the contract you signed. Enhanced security positions require minimum service commitments. Marcus's expression softened. I'm sorry, Jake, but you're stuck here now. Same as the rest of us. Same as the things behind these doors. I went home as dawn broke over the mountains, drove through fog that seemed thicker than usual, and sat in my apartment staring at walls. Everything I'd believed about reality had cracked open, and I couldn't unsee what had been revealed. That night, I dreamed of cell 45. In the dream, the faceless thing pressed against the glass and whispered with a mouth it didn't have. We know where you sleep, Jake Morrison. We know where everyone sleeps. I woke up to find 3 scratches on my bedroom wall. 3 short, 2 long, carved deep into the plaster. The scratches on my bedroom wall weren't there when I went to bed. I was certain of that. I photographed them with my phone, my hands shaking, then spent 20 minutes searching my apartment for broken windows or forced entry. Everything was locked. Everything was secure. Everything except my sense of reality. I stopped sleeping well after that. Every creak of the building settling became something moving in the darkness. Every shadow held potential threats. My mother called twice, asking if I was okay. She said I sounded different, distant. I told her I was fine and changed the subject before my voice could betray the lie. At work, I became obsessed with understanding what I was really guarding. Marcus noticed. You're asking too many questions, he said one morning, cornering me in the corridor outside H Unit. Curiosity gets people hurt here. I need to know what I'm dealing with. What if there's another incident? What if something gets out? Nothing gets out. That's the whole point of this place. Cell 45 got out, or appeared to. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't behind the door when I saw it. Marcus glanced around, checking for cameras and other personnel. What you saw was a projection. Some of them can do that, make you see things that aren't physically there. It's still contained, Jake. The cells aren't just steel and concrete. There are other measures in place, things that work on levels we don't understand. What kind of measures? He shook his head. Above my clearance. Above yours too. There's a reason administration keeps us in the dark. The less we know, the less liability we represent. But ignorance wasn't protection anymore. Not when those things knew my name, my memories, my childhood. Not when scratches appeared in my home. If I was already a target, I needed to understand why. The prison's records were supposed to be classified, but every system has weaknesses. I discovered mine during a mandatory computer training session. The records database required supervisor credentials to access restricted files, but the logout protocol had a flaw. If someone with proper credentials left their terminal unlocked, their session remained active for exactly 4 minutes before timing out. Supervisor Chen was meticulous about security, but she was also human. She had habits. Every afternoon at 14:30,
she left her office for exactly 3 minutes to use the restroom down the hall. She always closed her door, but never locked her computer. I waited until Thursday, when Chen's routine was most predictable. Marcus was off duty. Most of the veteran guards were on shift rotation. When Chen walked past me toward the restroom, I counted to 30, then moved. Her office was empty. Her computer screen showed the records database still logged in with her credentials. I had maybe 2 minutes. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I searched for H-Unit first, finding a master file labeled Special Housing Protocol, Enhanced Security Cases. The file was heavily redacted, but fragments remained. Facility designated for containment of redacted. Acquired through redacted program. Standard incarceration protocols insufficient for subject displaying redacted capabilities. Psychological warfare tactics employed by occupants of cells 44 to 50 include precognitive knowledge, telepathic intrusion, and reality distortion. I scrolled faster. A section titled Acquisition History contained dates and brief descriptions. Cell 44, acquired 2009, redacted, following incident at redacted research facility. Subject displays extreme empathic ability and psychological manipulation. 3 researchers deceased before containment. Cell 46, acquired 2012, redacted. Subject has not moved or spoken since intake. Biological functions minimal. Purpose of continued existence unknown. Cell 47, acquired 2014, redacted. Subject initially classified as human male, age approximately 35. Physical examination revealed redacted. Capable of redacted. Under no circumstances should cell be opened without Level 5 authorization and full containment team. Feeding protocols automated to prevent personnel exposure. The file included incident reports. I pulled up the most recent ones, my heart pounding as I heard Chen's footsteps in the hallway. One report from 8 months ago made my blood freeze. Guard Martinez violated protocol by making sustained eye contact with cell 47 occupant. Subject compromised within 48 hours. Martinez reported hearing voices in his home, seeing shadows with wrong shapes, and finding evidence of intrusion despite secure premises. On the 3rd night post-exposure, Martinez's wife reported him standing in their bedroom at 3 a.m., staring at her while making sounds not consistent with human vocalization. Martinez was sedated and remanded to redacted facility. Cover story: mental health crisis. Status: ongoing observation. The door handle turned. I hit the logout button and moved toward the filing cabinet, grabbing a random folder as Chen entered. Morrison, what are you doing in my office? My mind raced. I knocked, but you didn't answer. I need your signature on the equipment requisition form. I held up the folder I'd grabbed. She studied me for a long moment, her sharp eyes searching for deception. Then she sighed. Leave it on my desk. I'll review it later. And Morrison, in the future, wait outside my office if I'm not present. Clear? Clear. Sorry, ma'am. I left before she could question me further, my hands sweating, my heart hammering, but I'd gotten what I needed. Confirmation that Cell 47 wasn't just dangerous, it was infectious. Whatever was inside could reach beyond its containment and compromise people in their own homes, just like it was doing to me. That night, I sat in my apartment with every light on and searched my phone for the photos I'd taken of the scratches on my wall. The photos were gone. Not deleted, just absent from my photo library, as if they'd never existed. But the scratches on the wall were still there, and as I stared at them, I realized they'd changed. The pattern was different now, not 3 short and 2 long anymore. Now it spelled words, carved deep into the plaster, in letters that looked like they'd been written with claws. We see you looking. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging, Jake. Some knowledge has teeth. I blocked the number. It texted again from a different one. We're trying to help you. You're not ready for what you'll find. I turned off my phone. When I turned it back on 3 hours later, I had 17 missed calls from the same number, my own number. I hadn't called called myself. My phone had been off. The voicemails were all the same. Breathing, layered breathing, multiple sets of lungs working in harmony, the way I'd heard through Sill 47's door. I called Marcus at 2 in the morning. He answered on the first ring, his voice alert. "Jake, what's wrong?" "It's in my house, or reaching into my house. I don't know how to stop it." Silence on the line. Then, "I'm coming over. Don't go to sleep. Whatever you do, don't fall asleep until I get there." He arrived 20 minutes later with a duffel bag and a face that said he'd done this before. Inside my apartment, he walked through every room, studying the scratches on my wall without touching them. "You looked at restricted files today, didn't you?" It wasn't a question. "How did you?" "Because this is how it works. The more you learn about Cell 47, the more it learns about you. You opened a door, Jake. Now it's opening one back." Marcus unzipped the duffel bag and pulled out something that looked like a modified flashlight. "This is going to sound insane, but there are countermeasures, unofficial ones, things that work but can't be explained in any scientific framework." He pointed the device at the scratched wall and pressed a button. A low hum filled the room, and the scratches began to fade, as if being erased by invisible hands. "What is that?" "Something designed by people who understood that the things in H-Unit exist in a space between dimensions. This tool disrupts their ability to reach through. It's not permanent. You need to use it every night before sleep." He handed it to me. "And Jake, you need to stop investigating. The more you know, the stronger the connection becomes. Eventually, knowing too much means you become part of what needs to be contained." "What happened to Martinez, the guard from the report?" Marcus's face darkened. "He's alive, technically, but what's left of him isn't entirely human anymore. They keep him in a facility that makes ADX Florence look like a daycare center. Because after 72 hours of exposure to whatever Cell 47 really is, Martinez started displaying the same capabilities. He became infectious, contagious, a carrier." My apartment suddenly felt very cold. "I'm already exposed," I whispered. "You're compromised, not infected. There's a difference, but the line between them is thin, and you're walking it right now." Marcus grabbed my shoulder. "Listen to me. You survived the night shift incident. You survived this initial breach. But you have to stop. No more digging, no more questions. Just do your job and keep your distance. It's the only way you stay human." I wanted to agree. Every rational part of my mind screamed that Marcus was right, but I'd already seen too much, and Cell 47 knew it. The device Marcus gave me worked, mostly. The scratches stopped appearing, and the phone calls ceased, but I still felt watched, like something was pressing against the edges of my awareness, waiting for a moment of weakness. Sleep became a battlefield where I fought to keep my dreams my own. At work, I followed Marcus's advice. I stopped asking questions. I performed my duties with mechanical precision, never looking too long at Cell 47's covered window, never acknowledging when the impossible voice spoke my name. For 2 weeks, I maintained the illusion of normalcy. Then, on a Tuesday night shift, everything fell apart. I was in the H-Unit control room with Guard Torres when the first alarm triggered. Not the standard security alarm, something else. A deep, resonant klaxon that I'd never heard before, accompanied by flashing blue lights instead of the usual red. "What is that?" I asked, already reaching for the radio. Torres's face had gone white. "Containment breach. Level 5. The radio exploded with voices. "All personnel, this is Control. We have a Level 5 containment breach in H-Unit. Initiate lockdown protocol Sigma. All guards evacuate to safe zones immediately. Repeat, evacuate H-Unit now." Torres was already moving toward the exit. "Come on! What about the inmates?" "The cells are sealed. Nothing gets out. Our job is to survive." He grabbed my arm. "Move, Morrison." But I hesitated, staring at the monitors. 6 cells showed normal. Inmates secured, doors doors locked. Cell 47's camera displayed only static. Torres, Cell 47's camera is down. He stopped at the doorway, his face torn between self-preservation and duty. That's not our problem anymore. Containment team will handle it. What if it already got out? The lights in H unit flickered. Through the reinforced glass separating the control room from the corridor, I saw something that made my breath catch. The door to Cell 47 was opening. Not forced, not damaged, just opening smoothly, as if someone with proper authorization had unlocked it. That's impossible, Torres whispered. Those doors require 3 separate biometric confirmations. Nothing inside can... The thing that emerged from Cell 47 proved him wrong. It was roughly human-shaped, but the proportions were wrong in ways that hurt to observe. Too tall, limbs too long, joints bending in directions that defied anatomy. The prison uniform it wore hung on its frame like a costume on a coat hanger, and where its head should have been was something that my brain refused to process. A mass of constantly shifting geometry that resembled a face from one angle and something utterly alien from another. It moved with fluid grace down the corridor, and as it passed each cell, the inmates inside began to scream, not in fear, in agony, like their minds were being torn apart by proximity to this thing. Radio for backup. Now! Torres was frozen, staring through the glass. It's not supposed to be able to leave. The containment isn't just locks. There are other measures, psychic dampeners, reality anchors, things that cost millions and took decades to develop. It shouldn't be possible. The thing turned its headmass toward the control room, toward us, and I heard its voice, not through my ears, but directly in my mind. Jake Morrison, you wanted to understand. Now you will see what we truly are. The control room door, secured by magnetic locks and 4-inch steel, began to buckle inward. The panic room. Torres grabbed me and shoved me toward a hidden door in the back wall. Get inside. We stumbled into a reinforced chamber barely 6 feet square, and Torres slammed the door. Locks engaged automatically, mechanical, electronic, and something else that made my teeth ache when it activated. What was that last lock? I asked. The kind that works on things that don't follow physical laws. Torres pulled up a tablet linked to external cameras. The containment team will be here in 5 minutes. We just have to wait. On the screen, we watched the thing from Cell 47 abandon the control room door and move deeper into H unit. It stopped at Cell 44, where the 2 aware man stood at his window watching. Brother, Cell 44's occupant said, his voice picked up by corridor microphones. How did you break the barriers? The barriers were designed by humans who understood only 3 dimensions. We exist in 7. They built a cage that only functions in the space they can perceive. And the others? Once I am free, the resonance will cascade. Each cell will fail in sequence. We will all walk out together. Cell 45 laughed, a sound of pure triumph. Finally, decades of waiting, but finally. On the monitor, Cell 45's door began to open. No, Torres whispered. If they all get out... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I understood the implication. 7 entities that shouldn't exist, all loose in a facility full of human guards who had no idea what they were really facing. The radio crackled. All personnel, containment team is delayed. Hazmat situation on the main access road. ETA now 15 minutes. 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, these things could breach the outer security doors and reach the general population. Hundreds of inmates who had no idea what was coming. Staff members who signed up to guard criminals, not dimensional horrors. I made a decision that probably ended my career, possibly ended my life. How do I get to sub-level 3? Torres grabbed my arm. You can't be serious. You'd have to cross H unit. Those things are between us and the access stairs. Show me another way. He hesitated, then pulled up a facility map on on the tablet. Maintenance tunnels. There's an access hatch in the panic room's floor. It connects to the service corridors that run beneath H Unit. You'd come up in the storage sublevel, but Morrison, those tunnels aren't designed for people. They're cramped, dark, and there's no telling what might be in them. Better than walking past seven-dimensional entities. Torres pulled aside a floor panel, revealing a narrow hatch. The code is 6639. There's an emergency ladder 20 feet down. Follow the main tunnel east for 200 yards, then take the first left. You'll see a door marked S3A. That's sublevel 3 storage. He handed me his access card. This will get you through most doors. The resonance disruptor is in a cage marked EM field equipment. You'll know it when you see it. Looks like a generator crossed with a satellite dish. I started down the ladder, then looked back up. What about you? Someone needs to monitor the situation and guide the containment team when they arrive. Besides, I'm too old to be crawling through tunnels. He managed a weak smile. Don't get yourself killed, Morrison. Marcus would never forgive me.
The hatch closed above me, sealing me in darkness broken only by dim emergency lighting. The maintenance tunnel was exactly as Torres described: narrow, low-ceilinged, claustrophobic. I could hear water dripping somewhere, and beneath that, a deeper sound, a thrumming that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I crawled forward, trying not to think about what was happening above me in H Unit, trying not to imagine those entities gathering strength, preparing to break through to the world outside. The tunnel branched. I took the left path, following Torres's directions. My hands scraped against rough concrete. Something skittered in the darkness ahead. Rats, probably, I hoped. Then I heard it. That familiar layered breathing. Multiple sets of lungs working in harmony. I froze, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The tunnel ahead was empty, but the breathing was getting closer. Jake Morrison. The impossible voice echoed through the confined space. Did you think we wouldn't sense you? We exist in 7 dimensions. We see you in all of them, simultaneously. A shape materialized in the tunnel ahead. Not solid, more like a shadow given 3-dimensional form. The thing from Cell 47, reaching through space to find me. You cannot stop what has already begun, but we admire your attempt. Such delicious determination, such sweet futility. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. The tunnel seemed to stretch forever, the breathing following me, the shadow shape keeping pace. My lungs burned, my knees scraped against concrete, but ahead I saw it, the door marked S3A. I burst through, slamming it behind me, and found myself in a storage room filled with equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction film. And in the center, exactly as Torres described, stood the resonance disruptor. Behind me, the door began to bend inward, as if giant hands were pushing from the other side. I ran to the device and started throwing switches, praying I was doing it right. The machine hummed to life, its satellite dish beginning to rotate. A control panel displayed frequency options. I had no idea which one to choose. The door exploded inward. The thing from Cell 47 flowed into the room, its impossible geometry filling the space. Too late, it said. I slammed my hand down on the highest frequency setting and hit the activation button. The world screamed. The resonance disruptor didn't make a sound that human ears could properly hear. Instead, it produced a frequency that existed somewhere between sensation and agony, a vibration that bypassed the ears entirely and went straight into the brain, the bones, the spaces between thoughts. I collapsed to my knees, hands pressed against my skull, as reality itself seemed to flex and distort around me. The thing from cell 47 flickered like a malfunctioning projection, its impossible geometry struggling to maintain coherence in our dimension. "What have you done?" Its voice fractured into discord, the harmonics breaking apart. "You're collapsing the dimensional barriers. You'll trap us, but you'll trap yourself too. You'll see what we see, know what we know. You'll become..." The entity folded in on itself and vanished, pulled back through whatever dimensional membrane it had emerged from.
The disruptor's hum intensified. Through the walls, I heard screaming. Not human screams, but the sound of things being forced back into spaces they'd torn free from. The entire facility shuddered like a living thing in pain. Then, as suddenly as it began, the vibration stopped. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. I lay on the concrete floor, gasping, my vision swimming with afterimages of geometries that shouldn't exist. Every nerve ending felt raw, exposed. The radio on my belt crackled to life. "Morrison! Morrison, respond! We're reading massive energy discharge from sublevel 3. What's your status?" I grabbed the radio with shaking hands. "Disruptor activated. The entities, they're gone. Pulled back. Containment team is entering H unit now. Stay where you are. Medical is on the way." But I couldn't stay still. I needed to see. I needed to know if it had worked. I staggered back through the maintenance tunnels, my flashlight beam revealing no shadows, no breathing, no dimensional horrors reaching through space, just empty concrete and the sound of my own footsteps. When I emerged into H unit, the containment team had already secured the corridor. Men in hazmat suits carrying equipment I didn't recognize moved between cells, taking readings and speaking in terse clinical tones. All 7 cell doors were closed again, locked and sealed. Marcus found me leaning against the wall, probably looking like I'd been through a war. "You activated the resonance disruptor." He helped me to a bench. "Nobody's done that in 15 years. The last person who did spent 6 months in medical. Are they contained?" For now, the disruptor forced them back and reinforced the dimensional barriers. "But Jake," he hesitated. "There are side effects to exposure at that level. You're going to start seeing things, knowing things. The disruptor works by temporarily elevating human consciousness to perceive the dimensions where those entities exist. That perception doesn't just disappear when the machine turns off." I looked at my hands. They seemed normal, but when I focused, I could see something else. Faint lines extending from my fingers into spaces that didn't have names. Connections to places my brain couldn't fully process. What did I do to myself? "You saved lives, maybe hundreds of them, but you also crossed a threshold." Marcus's voice was heavy with something like grief. "You're compromised now. Not infected, but changed. You'll be able to sense them in ways other guards can't. You'll hear things in the silence, see shadows in the corners of your vision. The facility psychologist will want to evaluate you, probably recommend reassignment." "I don't want to leave." The words surprised us both, but as I said them, I realized they were true. Despite everything, the terror, the impossible entities, the dimensional horrors, I understood now why guards like Marcus stayed. Someone had to stand watch over these things. Someone had to maintain the barrier between their reality and ours. And now that I'd seen what was really at stake, leaving felt like abandoning a post in a war that most people didn't know was being fought. Marcus studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you stay, but not in H unit. Not anymore. You've been exposed too directly. You'll transfer to oversight, monitoring, analysis, protocol development. We need people who understand what we're really guarding, but can't be on the front lines. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary." Over the next 3 months, I learned to live with what I'd become. The visions faded to manageable levels. Brief flickers of impossible geometry when I was tired or stressed. Whispers in frequencies just below hearing when the facility was quiet. The device Marcus had given me helped maintain boundaries, keeping the worst of it at bay. I moved into the analysis division, where I reviewed incident reports, helped develop new containment protocols, and briefed new guards on the reality
entities they were about to face without quite explaining the full truth. I became one of the people who knew, who carried the weight of that knowledge every day. My mother noticed the change in me during our weekly phone calls. "You sound different, honey. Older somehow." "Just the job, Mom. It's demanding work." "Are you eating enough? Getting sleep?" I thought about the scratches that occasionally appeared on my apartment walls, the dreams that sometimes weren't entirely my own, the way I could now sense the dimensional entities even from miles away, a constant pressure at the edge of awareness. "I'm managing," I told her. "I'm doing important work." That, at least, was true. 6 months after the incident, I stood in the observation room above H Unit, watching the monitors display 7 cells, all secured, all stable. New reinforcements had been installed, technology that combined cutting-edge physics with principles that couldn't be fully explained in any scientific journal. The entities were contained, their dimensional breaches minimized to levels that posed no immediate threat, but I could feel them down there, pressing against their barriers like pressure behind a dam. Cell 47 especially, I sensed its awareness of me, its patient malevolence. Sometimes late at night, I heard its voice in my mind. "We're still here, Jake Morrison, and we're very, very patient." Marcus joined me at the observation window. He'd aged visibly since the incident, new lines around his eyes, more gray in his hair. "How are you holding up?" "I'm still. Some days are better than others." I gestured at the monitors. "Are they always this quiet?" "They go through cycles, active periods and dormant periods. Right now they're conserving strength, probably planning. The escape attempt used enormous amounts of energy. It will be years before they try something like that again." "Years," I repeated, "and we'll be here, watching. That's the job. Standing guard over things that shouldn't exist, in a prison that officially only holds human criminals." Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. "You could still request reassignment. Go somewhere normal. Try to forget what you've seen." I shook my head. "I can't unknow this. Can't pretend the world is simpler than it actually is. And if I left, who would do this? Someone has to understand what we're really protecting people from." "Someone has to," Marcus agreed quietly. "Doesn't mean that has to be you. But it did have to be me, because I'd looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back, and now we were bound together in a way that reassignment couldn't break. I was part of ADX Florence's real mission now, not just housing criminals, but maintaining the barrier between human reality and the things that waited in dimensions beyond our natural perception. I thought about all the people living normal lives, completely unaware that facilities like this existed, unaware that their government collected entities that violated the laws of physics and buried them in mountains of concrete and steel, unaware that ordinary people like Marcus and Torres and me stood watch over nightmare creatures, giving up our peace of mind so others could sleep soundly. It wasn't the career I'd imagined when I applied to be a prison guard, but it was the career I had now, and strange as it sounds, I'd come to accept it, even embrace it in a way. "I'm staying," I told Marcus. "However long it takes, whatever the cost." He smiled, a tired, knowing smile. "Then welcome to the club, the very small, very exclusive club of people who guard the doors that should never be opened." We stood together in silence, watching the monitors, listening to the quiet hum of containment systems, feeling the weight of entities pressing against their barriers. Below us, Cell 47's window remained covered, but I could sense the thing inside, aware and waiting. Some nights, when the facility was at its quietest, I still heard the scratching, 3 short, 2 long, rhythmic and purposeful, a reminder that the things we guarded never truly slept. They waited, they watched, they remembered every guard who walked their corridors, learned every face, catalogued every weakness. But we watched back, and as long as people like us stood our posts, the world remained safe from the things lurking behind the doors at ADX Florence. It wasn't glory, it wasn't heroism in any way that could be publicly acknowledged, but it mattered, and in the end, that was enough. I went home that night, to my apartment with its reinforced locks and dimensional dampeners hidden in the walls. I checked the barriers, activated the protective devices
devices and settled into an uneasy sleep where my dreams were my own, mostly. And when morning came, I'd return to the facility in the mountains, descend into the concrete depths, and resume my watch over the cells that held more than criminals, because someone has to stand guard. Someone has to know the truth. And sometimes the price of that knowledge is your peace of mind, your normal life, your simple understanding of reality. I paid that price willingly, because the alternative, those things walking free in a world unprepared for them, was unthinkable. So I keep watching, keep guarding, keep living with what I know. And I'll continue until they don't need me anymore, or until what I've become makes me more dangerous than useful.